And the headline on the front page of the Oz is budget to drive jobless rate lower. That's what it says. An exclusive here. Well, it's not an exclusive really, because there's four major papers with it. Josh Frydenberg has enshrined an unemployment rate of less than 5% at the heart of the government's fiscal strategy, pushing back the task of serious budget repair to beyond 2022 and squashing fears that the rapid recovery could trigger a turn towards austerity. The swift labour market rebound has outpaced even the most optimistic forecast in September, when the Treasurer set the target of reducing the jobless rate to comfortably below 6% as a condition for repairing the budget. I've got to say, Caleb, and we'll get to the other papers shortly, I think Australia's post-pandemic fiscal recovery is one of the great Australian success stories. And I look to JobKeeper and I look to JobSeeker and the way in which the economy was artificially propped up, but it was the right move at the right time. And, gee, I think we've got a lot to be proud of when it comes to the way in which Australia has responded, because the economy is really on fire right now.
Yeah, I don't think you could argue that the economic response from the federal government was not first class when it came to coronavirus. And I suppose, the states have taken a lot of glory in response to the virus over the last year or so, and everyone's lauded premiers and Mark McGowan, all these people who lock down the joint all the time. And really, a lot of the success of this country through coronavirus has been in spite of what the states have done, because if it were not for the tab being picked up by the federal government, we would be in serious trouble right now. I mean, economically, we would be in the doldrums. And, more than a year ago, we were sitting here saying we were looking at recession and whatever, and they were very real possibilities. The only reason that didn't happen was because the federal government acted swiftly with sensible policy to keep the economy afloat. Having said that, I think 5% or less than 5% unemployment does seem optimistic. We haven't had those numbers since before the GFC. 2008 was the last time. Between 06 and 08 was the last time we had consistent unemployment numbers below 5%. So it's a pretty optimistic statistic to drive towards, I would have thought. But it also does make sense that, this is not yet the time to be getting into the issue of paying down the debt and deficit that we've found ourselves in because of coronavirus. But we must acknowledge that there is only so long we can keep kicking that debt along. It has to be paid back at some point. Now, we're very lucky to be at a time when money is cheaper than ever to borrow, and it's probably the best time in a very long time to borrow and spend, but you have to repay that money someday. And I genuinely fear that all the money that has been spent in the past year and that will continue to be spent in the upcoming budget, which by all accounts will be a big spending budget, is money that me and my generation will end up paying back long after the people who instituted that spending are gone from politics. Because, it has to be paid back at some point. And if I'm paying for I was going to say the frivolities, but they're not necessarily frivolities. But, it's a lot of money that's been spent. And if that ultimately rests on my shoulders, well, that's hardly a fair deal either.
Let's go to the Fin and the SMH, and I'll get your comments on both of these. Spending more to fix the jobs and the deficit. The Morrison government has given itself licence for a big spending budget focused on job creation, saying an unemployment rate with a 4 in front of it was needed to lift wages and inflation, as well as drive down debt and deficit. Then, of course, you go to the SMH and the Age, both splashes, austerity ruled out in budget jobs drive. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg will use his post-pandemic budget to deliberately run the economy as fast as possible in a bid to drive the nation's jobless rate below 5%, upending the federal government's fiscal policy. Now, Jessica Irvine, in her opinion piece, says tax reform is dead, long may it rain. A typical tax burden is closer to half a person's income. And of course, Sydney house prices have risen by $100,000 in the last 3 months, which gives you an indication of just how turbocharged the economy is right now, Caleb.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, if you own property, I know there's a story on the front page of the Canberra Times, which we might get to a bit later, which says there has been, 20-odd% growth in the housing prices in Canberra, and I suppose one of the obvious reasons for that is that it is a public service town and not many public servants lost their jobs through coronavirus, so they really didn't have much to worry about. But there are a number of factors that are leading to things like housing prices rising. I mean, you don't have people leaving the country in the same numbers that they would have previously. You don't have young people going overseas. And I think the economic situation of the virus, if nothing else, sort of led people to think a lot more about how they were spending their money and how much money they had in savings. Because for the first time in many people's lives, they would have seriously been looking at possible economic doom. And if you have a reasonably stable job in an ordinary world and you're all of a sudden wondering how you're going to pay the mortgage, I think that concentrates the way people think about their money. And so I think one of the things people have done quite astutely is to invest in property, because of course it is one of the few things that very rarely goes down. And if you have more people wanting to get into the market by virtue of the fact that there are more people who just simply cannot leave the country anymore, your investment is always going to go up. It seemed to be a smart place to go. But of course that's going to price more people out of the market. It's a double-edged sword, of course, but it is proof and evidence of a growing, strong economy. And it could have been so much worse than this. So we really should be grateful for what we've got on the other side of coronavirus. We've had to pay a lot in terms of personal sacrifice, of course, in lockdowns and all sorts of things like this. But I have to say, even though we have blokes like McGowan running around locking people down every 5 minutes, I don't think I'd want to be anywhere else in the world right now.